Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Mara Fatemi. Getting right into it here, we got a packed show lined up for you guys today. An instant classic in the Western Conference last night between the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to recap that entire game. What an unbelievable game that was. Possibly one of the best games so far this season. Also, we had the Orlando Magic take out the Atlanta Hawks to set up a date between the Magic and the Boston Celtics in the first round. We're going to get into everything about that game and kind of preview a little bit of that Magic-Celtics series because it could be a little bit more interesting than what first meets the eye for that series. From there, we're going to look at the we're going to take a look at the Miami Heat. We're going to preview both play-in games later tonight between the Miami Heat and Chicago Bulls, as well as the Sacramento Kings versus the Dallas Mavericks, and what will be honestly, the Western Conference is a little bit better, obviously, because it's a little bit more competitive, but both games should be fantastic in both of those games. From there, we're also going to take a look at the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets in the first round their first round matchup officially set after the Warriors taking out the Grizzlies last night. That obviously one of the old school rivalries from the 2015 era. We all remember the Steph Curry, James Harden rivalries. That rivalry is set to take place starting Saturday, and that will be one of the premier series of the first round as well. And then we're going to close out the show talking a little bit more about the Memphis Grizzlies as well. Do they move on from Ja Morant in the offseason? Where should the Memphis Grizzlies go if they lose on Friday night? We're going to take a look at everything in there, but yeah. Before moving any further, I'd like to take a moment to remind you guys to please like and follow the show for more GSMC Sports Network content. Also, we get a number of questions and comments that come in during the show. So to ensure that your question gets read on air, I ask that you use the tips and donations link at gsmcpodcast.net for your questions. Just put your question at the top of the list so that I see it. It also really helps out the show. Again, the link is gsmcpodcast.net for all your questions and comments. And I'm sorry, Anthony, for ignoring you. I do see you have been typing in the chat while I was doing my opening. The Heat are playing later tonight. And do you recommend Miami lose this game so they can stay in the lottery? Because if they win, don't they lose a draft pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder? Yes, that is true. I don't know if I recommend them to lose this game just because it is a play-in tournament game, and honestly, a lot of playoff games these days still bring in a lot of revenue. So I don't know if it's 100% a lose this game, especially in the Eric Spoelstra era, Pat Riley era. I don't think that's ever been a thing. But I don't know. It's something definitely to look at, and we'll look at it in the third segment of our show later on. But getting right into it here, yeah, we had possibly one of the games of the season last night between the Golden State Warriors and the Memphis Grizzlies. If you didn't catch it on live TV, no worries. It was we'll recap it here right now. It was absolutely an unbelievable game. The Memphis Grizzlies starting out hot, jumping out to an early 5-point lead in the first opening minutes of the first quarter. And then from there, it was pretty much all Warriors, going on a 26-7 run to close the first quarter. And then in the second quarter, it was just more of the same story. Steph Curry putting on a barrage of threes. Jimmy Butler continuing to grow into playoff Jimmy form. It was overall just Draymond Green. It was their defense, if anything, that was being so tenacious on that end of the ball. The Memphis Grizzlies just couldn't spark any offense all game. That's what it felt like. They could not get their offense going. They could not. Jaren Jackson Jr. having issues in the paint with Quentin Post or Kevon Looney or Draymond Green. Brandon Pajimski giving Ja Morant problems in the guard area. In general, it was just the Warriors were forcing so many turnovers. I believe they finished with 13 steals in this game. The story of the first half was just Warriors defense and being able to light it up from the outside, and they really, really did that in this game. Um, but moving on into the second half, I believe it was a 13-point game going into halftime, and in the second half, it was a little bit of a different story, really. The Grizzlies coming out a little bit hotter, closing the distance, making a 10-point game until Ja Morant left the game. He got injured, twisted his ankle on the ground, falling. I believe he fell on Draymond Green's ankle after a fall-away shot. Ended up shooting the free throws so he could return to the game, which he eventually did in the fourth quarter. But before he did, it was the Desmond Bane show. Desmond Bane finishing with 30 points in this game, and without Ja Morant in the lineup, he was the leading force for the Memphis Grizzlies as they continued to make this game closer and closer going into the fourth. In the fourth quarter, it was more of a 1-point game, much closer, going back and forth between both teams. Zach Edey in this one being a driving force for the Grizzlies in the interior, finishing with 14 points, 17 rebounds. He played a phenomenal game and probably one of his premier performances as a rookie this season. We haven't really seen a whole lot or heard a lot about Zach Edey this season with Jaren Jackson Jr. starting over him. But in this game, it was the Grizzlies were using Zach Edey so much down the stretch, putting a lot of confidence in him, taking late free throws in this one. He was absolutely a driving force in this game and keeping it close and making it so as interesting as it was down the stretch. But fast forwarding a little bit farther down the line with, I believe it was, well, before I get there, the Warriors really just played an unbelievable game down the stretch here, just managing the clock. That is the first thing I want to say. With 13 seconds to go, they held a 3-point lead. Memphis Grizzlies holding a timeout in their back pocket. The Warriors forcing a trap on Steph Curry to take 5 seconds off the clock. For Grizzlies having a foul to give, forcing another 5 seconds off the clock. By the time the clock was over, it was about it went from 17 seconds to about 5 seconds in a blink. With a 3-point game, it was a 3-point game for the Grizzlies to deal with. And what will be the story in this one, really, it was their inability to get a inbounds playoff. With 5 seconds to play, being able to advance the ball to half court, and the Memphis Grizzlies could not inbound the ball. A 5-second violation on them forced the game to a close, and that was it. That's the only way I can describe this game. It was just a dominant defensive performance, a coaching performance from the Grizzlies, or from the Warriors. It just really felt like Steve Kerr implemented his experience. He just utilized his experience more than anything in this game. But yeah, another factor in this game that I really want to drive home was playoff Jimmy. Jimmy Butler is really the biggest reason the Golden State Warriors brought Jimmy Butler in was for these moments when it really matters. How much his play really mattered down the stretch. Not only in this one, but they brought him in for the playoffs. We know how important. We know his reputation come playoff time with the playoff Jimmy title, but we hadn't seen it in the last 2 years. We didn't see it last year in 2024 with his injury, and the last time we saw him was in 2023 when he brought the 8-seeded Miami Heat to the NBA Finals. That was the last time we saw playoff Jimmy, and the Warriors really took a gamble. With a couple of years left in Steph Curry's career, he's hinted at it before, saying he's just getting old. He just doesn't have that many games left, that many seasons left in him. And they took a chance. They originally wanted Kevin Durant before their trade deadline. Couldn't finish that deal. Switch gears to Jimmy Butler, and this is where they wanted that deal to pay dividends. Not in the regular season when they went on a 23-8 run to finish the season. Not when they went from 25-26 to 48-34 to close out from February 25th to now. This is last night was the moment they brought Jimmy Butler in for, and he did not underwhelm, finishing with 38 points, driving this offense from honestly the whole game. The only reason you would say not was because Steph Curry really just turned it on in the fourth quarter in classic Steph Curry fashion, the way he can get hot from three-point range. He scored 15 points in the fourth quarter, finishing with 37. But to start the fourth quarter, it was, I believe, Jimmy Butler had 33 points, with Steph Curry sitting at about 22 or 25. It was not close. Jimmy Butler was driving this team from the first half in the third quarter, honestly, as well as the fourth quarter, hitting timely shots when Memphis and Golden State were just going back and forth, throwing haymakers at each other. The NBA playoffs are back, and this game was was our first-hand experience in 2025 for the NBA playoffs. This felt like a classic playoff game, with especially in the fourth quarter, with both teams going at it to face the Houston Rockets in the first round. But that's neither here nor there. Anthony, I see you left another comment in the chat here. Seems like the past 30 years, the West has been a lot deeper in the NBA in terms of consistently. The East has always been very top-heavy. Why is that? Really, I'm not sure. I just think they have a lot more of there's just a lot more prospects. Steph Curry being in the Western Conference for the last decade plus. Obviously, they had the Spurs back in the day, the Dallas Mavericks with Dirk Nowitzki. Damian Lillard was drafted in Portland. Jokic being drafted in Denver. They just have a lot more. They just have a lot better prospect drafted wise, and homegrown talent. That's really where strength comes from in terms of teams. You see Boston with how dominant they are in the Eastern Conference. They have all their homegrown talent from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Cleveland Cavaliers, I know they got Donovan Mitchell, but they drafted Darius Garland. They drafted Evan Mobley. Even the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis, they drafted Giannis. This is all it's a lot of homegrown talent, and then from that homegrown talent is what attracts star players. And that's where the star players have gone recently. It's the Western Conference with LeBron James entering there in the last 5 years. Trying to think to another move. Another example of homegrown talent is Dallas with Luka Doncic, and without him being in LA, that trade doesn't matter. But him being in Dallas is a major reason why the West is better than the East. Their ability to draft better players is the reason why. But going back to the Warriors and Grizzlies, it was just an unbelievable performance. Ja Morant finishing with 22 points in this one. And yeah, it's just gonna be interesting to see how Ja Morant and the Grizzlies will face off in their game on Friday night for the right to face the Thunder. That'll be a win and go home game, and we're gonna get into it later in the show. But what can happen if the Grizzlies possibly don't make the playoffs, possibly lose that game? Do they move on from Ja Morant? Do they bring in a new star player to build their team around? Do they blow up the team? Do they keep Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and just bring in another star player, bring in assets for Ja Morant, and just rebuild their team? I'm not really 100% sure on that question. We're going to get into it later in the show. But yeah, this segment is dedicated to the Warriors and Grizzlies because they deserve all the credit in the world for the performance that both teams put on last night. Regardless of how the game finished, it was an unbelievable game for both teams. But I'm going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the Eastern Conference 7-8 matchup between the Orlando Magic and Atlanta Hawks. It wasn't as much of a classic as the Warriors and Grizzlies, but the Orlando Magic pleading their case, proving why they're still one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, regardless of their seed, finishing with a 7-game win streak to close out the season. They're still an unbelievable team, and we're gonna get into how they looked last night and how they will look against how they might look against the Boston Celtics. I'm gonna take a short break, and when we come back, it's gonna be Orlando Magic, Atlanta Hawks basketball.